when you're building a team to tackle a problem, make sure that at least one member of that team, product manager, product designer, engineering manager, at least one of them both has the skills and the passion to do each part of the job. Now, maybe it's the product designer. I've seen that work before. If the product designer takes it on, as long as it's explicit and your company leadership is okay with that, it's fine for them to take on some things traditionally more of a product manager's responsibility. And sometimes that even works better. I'm really excited to be here. My journey's been pretty all over the place so far, so I'm going to try and sum it up as quickly as I can. I'm a person who thought I would be a right brain creative. I used to write fiction stories. I wrote a lot of music. I was in Los Angeles and drank up the creative culture there for 10 years. And then realized that I'm not satisfied just with the right brain stuff. I really love logistics, details. That's how I discovered product management, which is a combo of both. My journey through product started at a B2B SaaS company in California and went to an enterprise. I was at GoDaddy for a few years. Now I found my way back into the startup world at Customer.io, although we are growing quickly. So pretty soon, I think I'll be back in more of a large company environment. And my favorite thing to do in the product space is think about strategy flywheels and organizational design and how to get the best product work of your life done. And I think that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today.
Yeah, same. I was going to make movies. Well, that was the plan in high school. Loved making short films, and I just think it's true and should be said at all times is that amateurs try to do things right. Professionals make sure their work doesn't fail.
Mm.
And that's what I found out really quick. I feel like there's a lot of creatives and a lot of case studies about filmmakers that make one good movie. With that success, they turn it into nothing because all the work they
Yeah.
did to make that first movie great, they just didn't. They just tried to like ride the coattails of their success into the next film, and it sucked and it was really bad. I started my career as a product designer, and I still love doing product design, but I always ended up finding that I needed to do my product manager's job. The reason I was doing it is because I feel like Marty Kagan's right. Most product managers are overpaid project managers.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just gonna start out with the hot takes. And I'm like, why they're not covering this? I have to do it to make sure that this thing doesn't fail. I want to guarantee that this is gonna work. And there's so much work beyond just does the design work? There's go to market, distribution, all these different things that need to be considered. Why do you feel most people in the product space are more of like the amateur that are trying to do things right? Because I feel like that's the moment right now is we're like, I think everyone's just trying to do things right and follow frameworks. What happened to
Love it.
just making sure something doesn't fail?
Yeah. Yeah. Just the simple core of making something successful. I think it's an interesting signal. If you're a product manager or someone asking yourself, what's the right person to follow or the right process to follow, you're already in trouble. Uh, the best product managers I know are good at taking ambiguity and turning it into something actionable, like a story that's memorable. That is by nature not a process oriented task. It's it's kind of that mix of art and science, but you've got to be willing to pivot and change with new information. Processes are meant to be repeated, scaled, and optimized. And yeah, that's not the same thing when you're trying to understand a customer and connect all these little detailed dots. That's how I like to think about it. Like you've got all these different insights that you've pulled. Maybe you've talked to this customer. Maybe you've read this support ticket. Maybe you tried this product. Maybe you listen to that podcast, blah, blah, blah. You collect like thousands of little anecdotes. And then your job is to figure out what the patterns are that link them into an opportunity that's going to be valuable for your business. And I've never walked a straight line to that path, at least not a straight line that was actually successful. I've followed directions from executives and others and been like, crap, that failed. And it's kind of my fault. I think it's not a process question in my mind.
I've learned pretty quick in my career that no one cares about your process. And especially as a designer, it almost ruins the magic of it. People hire a designer to work your magic, and that rubs designers the wrong way. But I've realized that the perceived value designers is that it looks like magic and you should just give people what they want. Now, I've learned to move away from process because every project's different, every product's different, and you can't apply the same linear process to everything. And so now I'm more like method over process,
Yeah.
where methods could be composable. You don't need to be doing things linearly to have a strong method, making sure that you're documenting your work. Just like these atomic habits of good product management, making sure that every time you get back from a customer trip, you're cataloging the evidence and tagging it and creating levels of certainty around a specific direction. That's just good housekeeping because good method compounds over time and it improves your taste. When you're talking to your team, has that applied to you as well? Like, hey, I don't really care how you got here. I want you to just tell me your conviction. And then if I poke on your conviction, you're able to pull your receipts out. Do you have a similar point of view on that? Or,
You're making me think of kind of a related. So let me try this out. This has happened. Well, it's happened many times, but it's top of mind for me because there's something going on at Customer IO that's related right now. When I think about pulling out convictions, as you framed it, I'm tying this directly to both the concept of what a product manager is and the concept of what a product designer is. I think sometimes the definitions of product manager and product designer really get in our way. And honestly, I love a lot of the stuff Marty Kagan says, but some of his dogma leads into this a bit. I'm going to go on a little tangent real quick. So you've got value risk, usability risk, feasibility risk, and viability risk. And value risk is the key one. In his framework, and I've heard this repeated by a lot of product folks around, a lot of product leaders that I really respect, but the idea of like, well, value risk really should be the product manager's area. Same with viability risk. And then there's this weird kind of concept of, well, isn't value risk kind of shared across like the product manager, maybe product designer, maybe engineers as well? It starts to get really ambiguous and confusing. Value risk in particular. I think usability risk is a little bit easier. Feasibility risk is pretty easy. Viability risk, talking about legal and compliance, is also fairly easy. But value is often the risk that I see does not get mitigated. When I hear you say, sometimes I find myself doing the product manager's job, I've heard that from other designers as well. Usually it's the value risk that's being talked about. Like, do you know what the customers want? Do you understand their problems well enough to be able to craft a solution that's actually going to impact them? Um, this is part of why I'm a big fan of the triad model. This like product manager, product designer, and like engineering manager, engineering lead. But the way that I've come to see it over time, and I'm curious if this will resonate with you, is rather than saying you have a product manager and they're assigned these risks or these tasks, like they're supposed to be the voice of the customer or like, yeah, really understand the customers and come and discover the problems, and then product design and engineering, like take the problems and create the solutions or whatever. Like when you're trying to codify that way, it doesn't really work because the shape of a product manager, product designer, and engineering manager are different. Sometimes you've got product managers who are very good at project management and not very good at the ambiguous work of trying to pull together like insights and opportunities. Sometimes you have product designers who are amazing at that, like really great at interviewing customers, extracting problems, understanding the market, even understanding some parts of the business. So with the triad model, the way I've come to see it is when you're building a team to tackle a problem, make sure that at least one member of that team, product manager, product designer, engineering manager, at least one of them both has the skills and the passion to do each part of the job. Now, maybe it's the product designer. I've seen that work before. If the product designer takes it on, as long as it's explicit and your company leadership is okay with that, it's fine for them to take on some things traditionally more of a product manager's responsibility. And sometimes that even works better. Similarly with project management, I've seen that work out. But it's got to be explicit and upfront, and that sort of messiness is not always welcomed.
well, it also makes it really hard to sell books to middle managers on how to
Yes.
set their team up. Oh, that
Yeah.
resonates with me so much. I really appreciate it. I have this real love-hate relationship with Silicon Valley Product Group. And
Mm.
sometimes when I'm in a really good mood, I'm like, you know what? I think it's time that I get one of them, Marty, or one of his partners to come on the show. Because when you read their stuff, and I've actually gone through like one of their trainings at one of the
Mm.
companies I worked at, like I think yeah, it was Leah Hickman. And I'm going through the old notes the other day. I don't disagree with this, but something's rubbing me the wrong way. Their work and this concept of dogma. He talks like it's a given, like this is how they do it in Silicon Valley. But I've met people who worked at Meta and Google, and they're garbage. They don't have any good judgment. Like two people from like Meta and Google come into a startup environment and just flame out within like a year because they can't handle ambiguity. What you made me think of when you said when you're designing a team as a product leader, this is a team topology problem, an org design problem. It reminded me of The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Anthony Horowitz. And he just talks about like the hard thing about companies is that you have to have the right people on the bus. For long-time listeners of the show, this is probably an episode like 135 or 140. I don't know. Depends on when it really gets released.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's making sure you have the right people on the bus. And if one person on that bus isn't supposed to be there, it ruins everything. And you've kind of helped me articulate that now. What rubs me the wrong way about Silicon Valley Product Group is that it's just a given that you need a product manager. But then they go back and say, well, product management's a competency. Sometimes the best product manager isn't a product manager at an org. Like it's the person that understands the most about the customer. It could be the designer or the engineer. Usually it's supposed to be the founder. Ideally, the founder should know the most about the customer. I'm curious if you saw this new article that's floating around. It's called Founder Mode. Have you seen that around LinkedIn?
No, I haven't seen it yet.
Well, it talks about how at startups, founders are being told, hey, you need to be in the trenches with the product team. You should be the first product manager as the founder. Then you delegate to bring in other product leaders later once you've found the product market fit and stuff. But then VCs are saying, well, you got to follow this playbook. Like you need to hire out your executive team and you got to follow. And so like the founder's getting pulled between doing best practice, which usually kills the company, and being told like, no, you shouldn't be. Like same thing happened to like Brian Chesky is like he fell into this trap. Like I'm the CEO after like 2020 and all that stuff. He's like, fuck it. I'm going to be in the details. And year over year cash flow is pretty freaking good. So it makes you wonder, like, let event happen in your career for you to gain that conviction that risk doesn't need to be tied to a job title. It just has to be tied to the right person. How did you come to that conclusion?
I think it's that is on display at every startup that I've worked at. Let's see, 4 startups in, but I'm giving myself. So when I joined GoDaddy, I kind of was doing the like startup within the big company thing at first. I came in and started a new business line. So it was like 4 or 5 people, but we really did kind of get to do what we wanted. And I think, a common phrase that I hear kicked around with startup folks is like, oh yeah, I wear lots of hats. I wear lots of hats. That means 2 things. One is like, okay, I'm overworked maybe, and I'm kind of like doing a lot of like playing out of field on a lot of things. Maybe I'm doing things that I'm not very good at. But the other thing is kind of the recognition of like, you need to be flexible, and you need to figure out how you fit in the solution. Like we all have this. I'm a big believer in this from the Jim Collins Good to Great, old book, good book. Talks about the hedgehog concept. I do hate that name because it doesn't make any sense. But the concept of like you've got like your skills and abilities, and then you've got your passions, and you want to find the intersection. They also throw in like the economic engine, right? So like you and me being like, hey, let's write books and do movies. Okay, well that's the hard one to drive the economic engine at the end of the day. Hard to make money. So there's that piece as well. But if you're working already at a company, whether it's a startup or a big one, you got to ask yourself, like, what are my skills? And then what am I actually passionate about? And do I have an intersection? And is my role, whatever I'm being asked to do, playing in that intersection? And I saw that happen a lot at startups, in particular with, honestly, it was mostly with engineers, where I'd be like, oh, damn, you're like, you came up with this brilliant idea. You like figured out a little prototype. Even like I watched these folks play out of role, time and time again. And I saw it leaning into that, leading to amazing outcomes as the team kind of reforms around their idea. And that's for me, I think how it's clicked is every time I've seen someone really passionate and skillful, you lean into it. And almost always that that works out, or at least it has for me.
Yeah, that's the same conclusion I came to. Like, I've seen product managers that, like, would slap people's hands for doing that. Like, "No, no, that's
Mm.
my job. Hey, you shouldn't be talking to customers unless I'm in the room with you." And it's like, "Hey, well, then I'll have to wait a month because you don't even have time to do one-on-ones with me. You're too slow."
Yeah.
And I've found that, um, good product managers are multipliers. Like, they're able to bring out the best in their team members, and also they're fun to work with because everyone feels like they could contribute to solving the problem.
Mhm.
Because yeah, it's like engineers, they'll tell you like, "Oh, no, it's not my job to, like, have an opinion," and I'll be like, "Well, seems like you have an opinion because you just told me what
Yeah.
that you think this is a bad idea. Can you, like, just tell me more about, like, where you're coming from?" And then the best is, like, giving, like, a high level, like, brief or problem, and then they come back and they're like, "Oh, I implemented WebSockets so that, like, there could be live changes here because you said that people were complaining about losing their work, when someone else has the same thing open." And I'm
Mhm.
like, "Do more of that." Like, I don't need to, like, write a ticket every time for you to do something. Like, you're a principal engineer, like, you know how to solve problems. Like, you don't need to do that. Like, I also think if you have a team of, like, go-getters that, like, understand where they fit into the problem space, um, then product managers having to work, like, 60-hour weeks because they're documenting every single thing that's gonna move the team, and they're blocking the team if they don't write something. Like, those teams are gonna outperform, like, the team that requires the product manager to write a ticket to get anything done.
Yeah. I I agree. There's when I hear the word go-getters, it makes me think of one other thing though, which is like just as often as I've seen folks be lean into playing out a role, like they're skilled and passionate about something, and you lean into it rather than try and slap it down. I've also seen a team of what I would call like go-getters. So for me, like when I think go-getter, I'm thinking like I see a problem, I try to
Yeah.
address the problem rather than like, hey, let me ask, oh, hey, should I do
Oh, yeah,
this? Or
they
maybe can
jump
you
right
help
into
me do that?
solution
Right?
mode.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You go right into it. What I've seen is like you can get a bunch of really skilled, really passionate folks together, but you don't have the conversation up front early enough. Doesn't have to be up front, just needs to be early about like, how are you like, here's a set of things we need to have covered. And one way is the SVPG, like value, risk, feasibility, usability. It's a very high level one, but you could start there. Who's going to cover, like, who wants to cover that? Who's going to cover it? Or even if someone starts showing initiative, being like, this is cool. You seem like you've got something here. You want to keep on pursuing that. I'm going to back off on that. Like, why don't you run off and do customer interviews? You let me know how I can be helpful. Like I'm talking as the product manager now. I'm happy to join the calls if you want. I'm happy not to. I'm happy to help you like source customers. I really want to lean into this idea that you've got and kind of make you responsible for it or accountable for, well, responsible for value. Like in this case, like really kind of lean you in if you're down for it. And they can, oh, whoa, no, I don't want to do that. Fine. Have that conversation up front. But I think that step sometimes gets missed uh, because it can
Yeah.
be kind of awkward and can kind of make it look like, well, I'm giving up my job responsibility. Now I'm asking you to do my job too. Like there's so many emotional pieces that can make that fall down. But if you don't do it, uh, it just
Yeah.
gets really easy to just charge in a million different directions too. So there's something about that like radical candor upfront
Uh-huh.
that I think is the extra ingredient. Go getters plus radical candor. Now you've unlocked the world.
Yeah, you reminded me of this sales executive TikTok. Because I'm like, okay, sales is important. Like a good like 10-minute presentation at town hall could set you up for the next 6 months of work if you just get that presentation right and that value proposition right, like what the team is trying to do. And one thing he talked about is that most of the buyers now are millennials, right? The boomers
Mm,
had objections. They'd be like, no, 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 like for this reason, and this all the sales training was around overcoming objections. Now there's no objections. Millennials, we like to be liked. Um, like so we will say like, no, this is a really good product. Let me, they'll try to deflect and stuff. And so the sales TikTok talker, he just said, yeah, whenever that happens, just say, okay, so everything's perfect. We can sign up a contract right now. And and then that like you back him into a corner to give an objection. Like what you just said there just reminded me of like there's a lot of people that have opinions, think that they could do the job of a product manager better than the product manager. I'm one of those people. I'm in that unfortunate situation where it's like, hey, I actually want to solve problems, like make useful, usable software designs. I love designing. If I could find a good product manager to like partner with me, I will gladly give away
Mhm.
like those responsibilities. It's just so hard to find one. And people are like, why don't you want to stay product manager? It's like, well, because I can't get out of it. Like
Mm.
I want to be I want to be like a principal designer, but that's part of the reason why I rebranded the podcast to Way of Product, because I'm like I need to figure out what good looks like so that I could help hire the right people.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but yeah, it's like but whenever I'm in that situation as like a product manager slash like design lead with like another designer, um, when someone's being a go getter and having that conversation, like, okay, so everything's perfect, like you can start doing customer calls and stuff, and like, well, no, no, like I still have to get my work done as an engineer. It's like, okay, cool. So where can I fill in the gaps here? Because like I think your idea is a good idea, but um I just wanna make sure that you're actually gonna take the time to, like, execute it well instead of just, like, you swooping and pooping an idea on me and then making it my responsibility to execute this, when you're the
Yeah.
one that has the vision, you know?
That's an interesting point. I wonder if you'll like indulge a question. Like I almost want to dial it back because I think it gets at the core. You're pointing out something so uh, prevalent. Uh, when you say, "Well, I don't want to get stuck there in product manager, like or product management," just as an example, like hypothetical, right? Like, oh, no,
Yeah.
I'm the principal product designer. Are there any job when you say like stuck there? Are there any things that come to mind? Like any like I don't really want to do that though. Like just specifics, and they can be random. I'm just curious what comes to the
Yeah.
top of your head. Yeah.
Yeah, no, this is why I love having my own podcast is I'm like, "Okay, cool, I get to get coached by, like, really awesome people, and
You give
it's
me
my
too much credit
show."
too early.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think for me, it's like, um, I I feel like the, industry puts, uh a very, like, little weight on, like, the discipline of, like, good, like, software design.
Mm,
Um, and if you look at, you know, Brian Chesky or, the CEO of Linear who are, like, you know,
yeah.
designers, but and their teams are performing so well and their software is, like, meeting the needs, and there's just something about, like, really good, like, execution on, like, the design of the software that just increase usability, but utility. Um, like, I wanna prove that if you have, like, a good design leadership presence, like, that could be a driver of, business value and growth, but
Mhm.
the industry keeps hiring, uh, product leaders, the reason that I even rebranded the show is because every company I go to, product leaders get, like, exited, every company I go to. Like, they can't
Mm,
last longer than 2 years, it's, like, the average tenure of a product leader. Um And it's because it's like they keep saying like, "No, we're gonna MVP it. We'll iterate past it." Oh, like we shouldn't worry about just basic usability. I'm not even talking about delight. It's just like, "Hey,
mm,
can this design meet like the basic utility requirements?" And then they hide behind MVP like, "Oh, no, it's okay. Like it's an MVP and it's like an excuse to deliver shit, but it's like we're
yeah.
learning." And it's like, well, you can't learn from a shitty product. All we're learning is that you're not cut out for product work.
Mm,
Um, and so I think, yeah, but people keep asking my questions like, well, what's wrong with like product management? It's like I think the problem is I don't think anyone knows what product management is, and deep down, I believe really it's a competency. Like the best
mm,
product managers I've met, like had like a technical discipline that they came from. They didn't start out as like a junior product manager out of college. Like they built stuff. Like they were making movies, they were data analysts, they were researchers, they were designers, they were engineers. Like the best product managers were craftspeople first.
Mm.
And that, so like the old CDO, like the ex CDO of like Airbnb said, like he's like, I don't get the idea of like a junior product manager because it's a leadership role. Like,
Mm.
why would you give a junior like a business unit like out of college? It's like giving a management consultant, like, like an associate management consultant, like
Yeah.
access to a CEO or whatever. Does that make sense? Like, that's
Oh,
just
it
me thinking out
totally makes
loud.
sense.
That's a really good
Yeah.
question.
No, I love it. So let me try and play back to you what I heard there. So one at the end, this is a fascinating topic in and of itself, is that concept of like an entry level product managers. Like, is that a thing? Um, there I would go back to like, it totally depends on the team they're plugging into, but well, we should put that one to the side for now. I think that's a fascinating topic though, because it's total. I've seen that trap too. Oh yeah, this
Yeah.
person's like really interested. Let's just make them the product manager. And then, yeah, it all goes to hell. The, the other thing that I'm hearing you talk about is this kind of net, like when you're like, no one really knows what product management is. Like in what I hear there is like, it's what I hear is it's kind of like so variable and all over the place that it's very difficult to constrain. Like when you think about like a good product manager,
Yeah.
I don't know if this is true for you, but when I think about that, I do think about someone who's quite flexible and very in tune with the team
Yeah.
around them and their customers, and is trying to, yeah, is thinking about, it depends on the product person, but ideally is thinking a little bit about like how their team is set up, how folks are supporting themselves, and then also where they best shine to try and focus and make sure that all the various risks are being covered. And that doesn't mean
Yeah.
that they are covering them. It means that there's some sort of responsibility of like, yeah, we're being explicit about how these things are covered. And if I am sensing that they're not, I'm doing something about it. But then you start getting into this weird kind of, it's almost not a product manager anymore. It's this like leadership uh, type of role. I wonder if, those are two paths I think would be interesting to go down: the junior product manager one, and then like, what is a product manager really? I'm let me I'm going to put my foot on the scales a little bit. Dialing back to that question of like, is there anything specific when you're like, "Ooh, I don't want to get stuck in, I can do the product manager job, but I don't, something about it, like, I don't know that I want to do it." When I've spoken with principal designers who I love working with, like they're incredibly fun. So when I have worked with folks at like your caliber, um, one of the things that I notice is you get to a point where some folks get to a point where they're like, I want to do the high level kind of creative design and strategy. Like I want to like
Yeah.
figure out the problems customers did, at high level, high level, high level. But what I don't want to do is the grindy kind of work of like, oh, are you going to set up this meeting? Are you going to help build alignment with this team? Are you going to put together a project plan around like go to market? Are you like some of those,
Yeah.
kind of things that feel a little bit more administrative? I'm wondering if that resonates with you. It might not at all, but I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah. I think that's it. I think
Mm,
that's it. Like, yeah, that's why I'm like, when I find like a good product manager, like I try to retain him. I actually have this amazing product manager right now that like, well, we're currently like peers, but I'm like angling to figure out how do I give him more of like the portfolio, because
ah,
I trust his judgment. But the reason is he has this amazing research competency, like
cool.
hard skill. Like he knows how to identify like insights, and he knows how to organize it and like give a coherent explanation as to why. That I agree with what he's saying, and I'm like,
Me.
no, like I think we could get more out of this partnership if like he's thinking holistically about the whole portfolio, and then I'm just like, executing against these insights because we're making like duplicate discovery tickets and Jira product discovery and stuff.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, like so, like 2 weeks ago, this I every time I get like a new podcast episode, I'm like new booking. I'm just like, man, why
Uh-huh.
am I doing this? Like, I just feel so tired. And then every time I come in, and then I get in the episode, and I'm like, it gives me
Yeah.
so much energy because I'm just like, dude, it's so relevant to me. Yeah, I think it's that. That's a really good insight. Is that I'm like, the more that I'm trying to like manage stakeholders, the less time I'm spending solutioning and like in
Hmm.
trying different stuff because usually I only have time to do one or two versions. I should be able to crank out like 10 different iterations and test them all and like de-risk, the designs. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's it.
So that's one of the things that I tell product managers is one of the challenges is you don't have it. There are fewer specific outputs that you are expected to produce. And by specific output, you mean like a design. Like that's a very
Mhm.
hard thing that you do. Similar with engineers, right? They've got like code. They are
Yeah.
writing, shipping code. Product managers, what's your output? I've heard a lot of, like, oh, it's decisions. Well, that's not
PRDs.
true. Yeah, PRDs. I mean, it depends. Like, it depends on what your leadership team expects from you. But I find that putting that kind of output um, expectation on product managers actually leads to less creativity, like almost all the time. Uh, so let's see, what's the best way to frame it? So I was chief of staff before transitioning back into director of product. This is a weird role that I had at Customer IO for 8 months, and that role helped me kind of figure out what I was trying to articulate, what I'm trying to articulate about the challenge of the product manager, and sometimes why people simultaneously are like, no, I can do that job better, but I kind of want to, or like, I don't want to fully embrace it. Um, and as chief of staff, I was responsible for uh, acting kind of like a VP of product or VP of engineering or whatever, kind of like in the interim. We were having some new
Yeah.
folks in, um, and I ended up rubbing some of my colleagues the wrong way, and I was trying to figure out like, why is this? Why people seem kind of frustrated with me? What's going on? And I realized that it was this very awkward role where no one reports to you. You're not like the chief product officer or whatever.
Yeah.
And yet your job is to help them do their jobs better. Well, what does that mean? And I thought it meant like enabling or trying to like some light coaching or some advice, feedback, some radical candor. And maybe it does, but that's a really awkward thing to receive. It's just sometimes a really awkward thing to receive from a peer. And what they wanted more was like, oh, can you book this meeting? Can you project manage this? Can you take notes on this thing? Da, 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 da. Like, and I was not interested in doing that. So this is a very long-winded way of saying I think the product manager role has some similarities with this chief of staff kind of thing, which is there's some you're not directly responsible for much when it comes to outputs, but you are kind of so that makes you kind of this swing role where you kind of like or another way to picture it is like the fill in the cracks role. You kind of do
Yeah.
the stuff that helps the team move faster, but a lot of that stuff is administrative. And then the best product managers that I know uh, understand that that's low leverage work, and so they don't do a great job with it. It doesn't mean they don't do it, but they don't do a great job with it. That's not where they really put their energy. Um, and it in all the conversations when I've been talking with designers and engineers about like, okay, who does what? Inevitably, there's some conversation that goes back to who does project management, who creates the issues, what are we writing in there, like who's like a lot of the basic admin kind of stuff. And a lot of the times, there's pressure for the product manager to take that on. It's like a hot potato.
Yeah. No one,
And
no one wants to do it is the takeaway.
yeah, thank you. That's exactly it. No one wants to do it. And when you talk about like product managers as overpaid project managers, I think that's part of why is when product managers feel this pressure of like, well, no one wants to do it, and I'm the swing role. What's my real output? It can be easy to be like, well, that's one thing that I can do. That's like, oh, what do I produce? I produce like project status updates. I make sure Jira is organized or linear or whatever it is that you're using. I've got my backlog groomed. I
Yeah.
schedule the meetings with the right people. I like post the right reports to leadership when I need to. I track the right metric. Like it becomes very administrative. And that stuff is important, but it's also a trap. Because if you're doing all that stuff, you better believe you're not like doing the super, super hard, ambiguous work of talking to customers, understanding the market, and doing what it sounds like this product manager you just called out does, which is great research, translating that into like actionable insights, communicating that stuff in a way that's understandable. Um,
Yeah.
Can't do that as a project manager.
So how do you get out of that? Like, I mean, like what there's no easy way out of this problem for sure, but like what have
Yeah.
you found like cuz there's a couple things I'm hearing, right? There's keeping the executive ELT group happy
Hmm.
and executive leadership team happy and the board happy, and then there's keeping people doing the work happy.
Yeah.
Um, and then you're in this role that like you basically it's all influence. Um, like what have you learned that is like what's the minimum viable product to keep ELT happy?
Hmm.
And then also uh be able to solve like problems and provide like clarity for the rest of the team because that's like I'm in the the Freaky Friday scenario where I'm in like product management. I'm like, no, like you need a good product manager. They're just so hard
Yeah.
to find, right? Like it's a competency that's needed, like 100%. Like the judgment there, it's just I like in when it's definitely like on you, and so anyone talking crap on product managers, like take it from me, like don't learn it the hard way and become a product manager, like because you'll realize like no, this is a very very hard job because of all the reasons we just outlined. So like what have you learned at least? Maybe I I could do a string
Yeah.
of interviews with other people to kind of triangulate.
Yeah, sure. So, do you remember the movie Karate Kid, the original one?
Yeah, the
Yeah, yeah, Ralph,
Ralph
whatever
Macchio.
his name is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So there's one part where, and I can't even remember now, the teacher is talking about the best way to like block a punch is to not be there. And similarly with problems, the best way to solve a problem is to not have it. And that's counterintuitive in some ways. But when we talk about all these admin details and the project management and the stakeholder alignment, uh, what I've noticed is you you have to do way, way less stakeholder management when you have a clear, memorable story that and success metrics. Like if you're like, imagine this: if you're going to your leadership team meeting, you're like, "Hey, yeah, we just shipped this feature. Adoption's way better than we expected. We've been looking over the past launches for the past 12 months, and this one is like outpacing them like 2x. We're trying to get into like understand why, how, like what's going on here. You're going to get a lot less questions about like, is your backlog organized? Why would anyone be talking about your backlog at that point? Um, and of course, you can't guarantee uh, success of a feature or product, but the key insight is the way to not have to deal with all that stuff or like have all the conversations about who gets what is to be really good at managing value risk and making sure that that's actually managed on your team. So like do your best work when it comes to uh, insight generation and opportunity definition. Like that's where you should invest all of your time. When in doubt, that's my favorite thing to do with designers because there's nothing that, at least in my experience, there's nothing that um, calms leaders more than seeing awesome mock-ups that they're excited. You can talk till you're blue in the face, but sometimes until you're seeing something tangible, I'm assuming the product has a UI in this case. It's anxiety producing in those meetings. So like a cheat code is take the leadership team along with your vision and use mock-ups to do it or vision, like something that's tangible to do it. I've seen that work really well, but you got to buy yourself the time and space to be able to do that research up front. Um, and that honestly is the tricky part. So it
Yeah.
maybe sounds a little like a cop out answer. Like you still have to deal with the administrative stuff, but I have found that focusing on identifying a really interesting problem and getting your team energized, all of a sudden people are less worried about, did you update this ticket? Did you change its state? Who's doing the queue? Like that stuff matters, but a lot less. People are a lot less
Yeah.
reluctant to pick up some of that work themselves, just the piece they own, when they're interested in the problem they're solving.
Yeah. And uh designers and engineers are more than happy to pick up the admin work if they believe in what they're doing. I
Yeah,
think yeah, like
exactly.
what you made me think of is all the times when product managers have been spending more time on the admin work and like the project management work. It always is because the product leader um is under pressure from the leadership team to be like, okay, like obviously, like you don't know where to go. So now we're gonna have to scrutinize your backlog because you're not telling the story correct. Like you're not telling a story that
Yeah.
makes us feel like you're on the right track. There's uh, it's funny is like I never thought I'd be recommending like a science fiction series so
Hmm.
much on a podcast about like for people that love reading nonfiction. I mean, nonfiction books, but the Red Rising series has a lot of. I think it's because it was written by a tech worker who became an author, and so there's a lot of like nonfiction truisms in there. And one of them is, you're not following me because I'm the strongest. So and so is the strongest. You're not following me because I'm the smartest. So and so is the smartest. You follow me because I know where to go.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And that's what leadership is. And I mean, and
Yes.
so like you're really like cementing to me that like product management is like a leadership position because pe- like the sign that you're a good product manager or a product leader is that people want to follow you and they're not like nitpicking your process. They're like, "Oh, I see the vision, I see the story, I see the promised land. Okay, I don't care about all that other stuff. Like it seems like I could trust you in that vision."
Yeah. People want to do meaningful work, and the best product manager helps make the work feel meaningful.
Yeah, and how do you create meaning? It always comes down to the story. Like, one of
Hmm.
the I talked with the CPO of Rally where it's literally like um, a collector's like an online museum for investing in collectibles. Like you could buy like, a partial stock in a rare baseball card or like a Porsche 911 that's like iconic from like a movie. And then if some richer collector buys the Porsche, you get an IPO, like you get a liquidity event. It's a really cool concept, but,
Yeah.
this guy knows better than anyone. It's Rob Petroso. He's just like, what gives something value? It's the story behind it. Why do people buy, like, nice art? It's because they could tell the story to their friends when they,
Yes.
brag about it. Like, um, like, meaning gives value to things, and if something doesn't if you feel like the current process doesn't mean anything, and as a designer, feeling like I had to do the product manager's job is because like whatever they were telling me to do, I'm like, I don't feel like what are we trying to do here? Like, why are you asking me to make this
Yes.
like very tactical design decision? Like, where are we going? And then I'm just like, okay, now I need to figure out like if this is the right thing to do. And then all of a sudden, if the designer's having to do that, that product manager failed because now the
Yep.
designer's not designing.
Yeah. 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 That's right. And then it's a vicious cycle. So if everyone is focused on, yeah, on the process, whether like generating outputs, whether it's PRDs or mockups or just
Yeah.
code, right? Then you fail. That's where all your time's going. So you're not actually figuring out where to go. And that's another reason why junior product managers are almost never successful in that role of like leadership and like knowing where to go, unless they have a founder or they're coming in with a really strong informed vision. Um, yeah, because you need that piece, and then a lot of other things can fall in place. And if it's not the product manager, then again, you can have a product designer or an engineer who's willing to say this is where we're going to go. But they can't do that and their other job. That's why you have to make sure there's some sort of company, like some sort of balance throughout the team. I've seen it work, but usually I've seen it end in whoever that person is becoming a product manager, whether it's an engineer or a designer, like in future teams, if they really stick with it.
Yeah, and the problem is, and I'm suffering from this exact like phenomenon that you just described is like if you're good at product management, the company's like, no, we're not you're in it. You're in the game now. Like you can't leave now because it's
Yeah.
so hard to find like if you're good at it, you can't leave
Yeah.
because it's so
Yeah.
hard. You could always find a good designer, because you always replace a designer. Like there's so many talented designers. I mean, it just depends on the company's ability to attract top talent. But like when you find a good product manager, it's like you keep that person.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. They're very hard to interview, very hard to find. Yeah.
And so but at the beginning of this episode, you talked about like something you're passionate about is like the guidelines for like, how do you build like a product management team at different points of the growth trajectory. Now that like we know like I think your point of view is like spot on like this job family. So I'm gonna try to land the plane, right? So this is like your opportunity to like close the loop on everything we just said with some tactical advice. Um, so like I guess how do you like depending on different stages of growth, like how do you personally hire and build out like product management functions? Knowing everything we just said
Yeah.
is being considered.
Yeah. I think there's two things I'll call out. One is just it. I don't know, hit the nail on the head one more time. Like if you are a startup founder, you should not be hiring another product manager until you have product market fit. And I'll dodge the whole product market fit. What is that? How do you know it? Like that sort of thing. But one key signal is like as a founder, can you afford to pay someone 120,000 a year? Uh, can you like off your business proceeds, not like investment that you've gotten from a VC? Yes. Okay. And maybe now it's time to start thinking about it. Like wait until you've generated enough value to be able to pay for someone outside of an investment. I think what you'll find is that drastically uh, slows the pace of hiring your first product manager as a founder because getting to that product market fit is challenging. But that would be my pitch. If you don't do that, you're much more likely to bring in someone who's not going to be able to do the job and is actually going to slow the team down and become a project manager. The more interesting framework that I would pitch, or at least the one that's been way more impactful for me, having worked at bigger companies as well, is the idea of having a very clear sense of what your product flywheel is. And flywheel is a little bit of a buzzword, so I always feel a little hesitant saying it, but let me give you a specific example, like with Customer IO. And this has been successful for us. So you can define flywheels a few different ways. We define ours based on customer behavior, like a pattern of customer behavior that we want to drive. And at its simplest, talking about Customer IO, which is a marketing automation platform, it goes, we want customers to bring some sort of data into the system. And it could be first name, could be last name, could be their email address, could be like they signed up at this time, lots of different things. Doesn't actually matter. They just need to bring some sort of data into the system. That's step one of the flywheel. Step two of the flywheel is message. And that is you're taking the data that you put into the system and you're using it to trigger and personalize some sort of message. So the very common use case here that probably all of your listeners could follow is like an onboarding campaign. Like, oh, I've signed up for your product. Now I'm going to send you an email and say, welcome to, product XYZ. Let me show you around or something like that. Very, very basic one. But you want to be able to personalize that experience with the data. If you just send a generic campaign, that's not so interesting. So data to message. And then the last part of the flywheel is influence. And that is the message that you have sent, personalized with the data that you've added to the system, has actually influenced the behavior of the recipient. So for example, let's say you send them a message and you're like, hey, based on, like, I see you poking around this feature area. Here's something that our most successful customers do with this feature. You want to like give it a shot. Here's like a one-click way to install a template and get going. And the influence then would be, oh, the person received that message and then they took action on it. They actually tried to install the template or something. Now you've completed the flywheel loop, and that's the aha moment. So when our customers get around this loop for the first time with Customer IO, that's when they're like, oh, I should put more data in the system and use it to trigger more messages and automatically influence more behavior. That's both good for my customers and good for my business. And then you go around and around. So from a product organization standpoint, and this ties back to when you decide to hire another product manager, we've got clarity around how we want to drive the flywheel. And driving the flywheel means getting folks around it as quickly and as frequently as possible. Because we know that if they do, that drives their business value. And it also is how our pricing works. We price based on the number of profiles that you put in the system, which is that data piece. So we want to help you grow, and our business grows when you grow. So have that sort of system in mind so that when you hire a product manager, you're not, hey folks, I'll come in, just take over what I was doing. Like, this is the product, like make it better. We need here's a, feature, go ship that feature. Like, you need to figure out where they fit in the system and where they can focus and drive. And if you do that right, then you can get independent product teams that really are autonomous that naturally reinforce each other. There's a concept that I love calling, we want to help people follow the pit of success. You want gravity to be pointed in the direction of success. So
Yeah.
that each like group and each product manager knows their focus. They don't need to coordinate much with the other teams necessarily. They can just focus on their area. And as long as it's part of the flywheel and you have some sort of measures to make sure that you're cranking that thing, these folks are going to naturally reinforce each other. So it's a lot, but the short version is you need to know what you're going to ask your product manager to focus on. And if you don't hire them. Don't hire one. You're not there yet. You got to understand your own growth system first.
Yeah, let me play that back. So one is, can you economically support a salary of like a
Yes.
good product manager? I mean, that's a good indicator of product market fit is like you could financially support having someone optimize this and make it better. And that I've never heard that before. That's very tactical advice. Like, hey, like a product manager, like if you're hiring someone to figure out the flywheel using VC funding, you're like layoffs ensue
Hmm.
because eventually you run out of runway and you're like, okay, sorry, product manager, like we set you up for failure, which I feel like a lot of product managers get set up for failure in this scenario.
Yes.
And then the second thing you said was figure out the flywheel, which I'm probably going to butcher this, but my understanding of a flywheel is that it's a heavy piece of equipment that once gravity takes its hold, like once it gets a couple rotations in and gravity takes hold, it will move by itself and use its
Yes.
own weight to uh keep moving, right? And I really love that concept of like understanding like, okay, where does like where's the tipping point where it just the customer will self-sufficiently continue servicing themselves in your product? Is that also helps me, like that does that help you also, like, decide, like, okay, when to, like, hire the next product manager? It's like because you're basically putting a product manager on each flywheel, and that's how you that sounds like the triad squad design concept is, like, maybe the first one, you got the core flywheel. Now we have enough data, we've been doing it manually, operationally for a while, like, the onboarding process, we figured out the flywheel, like, in the MVP status. Now let's hire a product manager to, like, get this onboarding thing going. Is that
Yeah.
how you view it? Because I just
That's
want I'm not insinuating or using your
that's
word.
exactly it. No, that's
Yeah.
exactly it. And that's how growth teams, for example, fit in. Sometimes when I present this concept, there's this like, okay, yeah, but what about teams that kind of affect all parts of the flywheel? Like a growth team, which is trying to like get people onboarded, right? Those Everything actually fits into it. So growth is the first crank. That's it. They're the first crank all the way around the flywheel. Once they've done the first crank, their responsibility is over. So yes, they will have to touch certain other parts of the flywheel as well, but they're doing it still with a unique focus. Um, and and yeah, there'd be a triad at each part of the flywheel, and then you can also break the flywheel down into little sub flywheels. But first, make sure you've got the
Yeah.
core right. But yeah, that would be it. So you kind of notice, okay, where are we struggling the most? Now well, I think we could optimize this area. I think the problem is enough. That's also a challenge. You want to give, if you're going to hire a product manager, unless they're very, very senior, which is, at least in my experience, quite rare to find as a first PM hire or even a 10th, uh, give them a more constrained area, less ambiguity, and they're going to be more to turn that ambiguity into value. And the flywheel also helps with that, focus them in a bit.
And that's where associate, like, junior PMs come in, is you could break down the flywheel, like, the risk of hiring someone that's a little green behind the ears, um, is lower because you've already figured out like, it's already moving itself, like, so now you just
Yeah.
have to, like, look at the data, make decisions, fix like, understand, like, how to optimize it. Okay. Brendan, I wanna respect your time. Thank you for being gracious, staying over a little bit. Um, like, finally, like, is there anything that you feel like hasn't been said that should be said? And then how can people could find your work? How can people find your work?
Yeah. Hmm, there's one thing I was going to call it that hasn't been said. Let me see if I can do it. Do it just quickly. There's a guy named Nan Yu. He's the head of product at Linear, and he did a talk at a recent Figma conference about heirloom tomato org design. And I would pitch that as something else for folks that are interested in this problem of like constructing teams and triads, and how do you and like, does it have to be the product manager owning value risk? I would recommend it. It's another interesting way to think about having oddly shaped teams that are perfectly fit for the problem that they're trying to tackle. In terms of how to find me, if the easiest way is on LinkedIn. I'd love to hear from folks who have, but particularly I'd love to hear from folks who disagree. So if there's anything they're like, you're missing this, please feel free to hit me up. Brendan Fortune on LinkedIn. I'm also at MNPM. I live in Minnesota, so mnpm.com is my website. You can get a hold of me there too.
Brendan, I really appreciate you, and I'm super grateful that you were patient to listen to my rantings and then ask like good follow-up questions, because I really do feel like I was blocked. Now I feel a little bit unblocked. I appreciate it. You make me feel a lot more comfortable with the idea of like, hey, maybe this is my life now. And I mean, I enjoy the work of product management. It's just, it was like that little like mental block of like, oh, are people going to just expect me to also like present on my admin work and stuff? I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I just love talking about this stuff. Thanks for your questions.
Yeah, no problem. So good one. Thanks for on the show.
Hey, listener, thanks again for listening to The Way of Product. As we power down today's session on the fusion of creativity and technology, let's solidify the energy you've gotten from our dialogue today. If you've gleaned insights or strategies that could turbocharge your projects, I have a small but powerful ask. Swing by the platform where you're hearing this and leave a review. Think of it as your digital high five to us. It's a fuel that propels this content to more creative technologists like you, amplifying the impact of the shared knowledge. So until our next interview, keep pioneering and pushing the envelope. Thanks again for lending your ears and your imagination to our community. Catch you on the next download.